To episode 2 of 30 plus 2. So in the first session with Gareth Chamberlain, you heard the name Robbie Herring come up a lot, and we've got the man here ourselves. So welcome, Robbie. Thanks for your time today.
Cheers, Neville. Thanks for inviting me.
No, cool. And so everyone around the motocross paddock seems to be pretty stoked. There's news that you're going to be doing some racing through the summertime at some of the vets races.
Yeah, it all really stemmed from watching Foxhills last year. I went to the vet motocross donations at Foxhills, and such an awesome event.
Yeah.
So many people that I remember from the past I hadn't seen for a long time. The racing was really good, the atmosphere, and it just kind of took me back to what it was like racing in sort of late 80s, early 90s.
Okay,
and
cool.
I got quite a buzz from it, and I thought,
Yeah.
it'd be so nice just to ride again,
Yeah.
just to sort of tick that off the old,
done
the list of things to do. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a little go this year, have some fun, but mainly
Okay.
fun.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take it too seriously because I'm 55 years old now. So
Yeah, it's quite easy to get caught up in the whole racing thing again. But I think if you can keep it as like a fun thing and weekend to see people ride bikes a little bit, just keep it fun.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to it, and possibly Farley Castle the week before as well.
Oh, cool.
With Dave King's event at Farley, so
Okay, cool.
that'll be kind of like a little bit of a warm up.
Yeah,
I might do the odd meeting, maybe an Evo MX meeting or something beforehand as a little bit of a warm up,
yeah.
just so I don't go there completely blind. Otherwise, I'm going to suffer from arm pump.
That's the thing with a lot of people suffer with, like they ride like 5 or 6 times before, and then they don't actually like fully enjoy the weekend because their arms are pumped. Like if you can get 2 or 3 races under your belt, and then you can actually enjoy the weekend because you can enjoy your riding. You're not just hanging on, and obviously it gets quite dangerous when your arms are
hanging
pumped.
on around Foxhills off those drops with a bit of arm pump can be a bit scary, believe me. So
you love Farley though, dude. Farley's a bit of your style with
Farley's good. Farley's good, yeah.
So it must be pretty cool, like obviously you've been retired for 20 years now, and to see a reception like that, and in the first video, speaking to Gareth from Motivision with the filming and stuff, like, and not just Gareth, everyone you speak to has got a Robbie Herring story, like it must be pretty cool to see the impact that you left on the sport. Still 20 years on, everyone's so excited to see you return, and everyone still talks about the stuff that you did while you were racing.
Yeah, it's you kind of forget, because I've been out of the industry sort of for so long, really, and I don't really go to any races as such. It's quite nice to still be kind of like held in that sort of to be thought about like that I brought so much to sort of motocross and change sort of British motocross. So yeah, it's quite an eye-opener, really, and quite often I go there thinking, I just want to go there and watch, and I get sort of hounded by loads of people, but it's nice, it's nice because I love the sport, I love riding my bike, I love racing. So it's nice to know that I haven't been forgotten, so yeah. So.
I think a lot of the people that still go watch the British Championships and stuff are still from the area. I know I went to Ling last year with Paul, and man, it was like he's a superstar, dude. Like, Coops is always undercover. He had his hoodie up and stuff, and the amount of people that stopped him and couldn't believe he was at a motocross track. Like I think that core motor scene, especially when you go to tracks like Ling and those old school kind of center tracks. Canada Hearts is one of them, where you still get that old core motor grip, and then obviously everyone comes out for the Foxhills thing,
Well, I think as well, like when we were racing, sort of the era from sort of the 80s, probably early sort of 83, 82, 83, probably to the mid to late 90s. I think that era of British motocross was really strong because, at any one time in any of the Grand Prix classes, maybe not the 125s so much, but the 250s or the 500s, you probably had, 5 guys placing in the points, British riders placing in the points. You probably had 3 or 4 guys in the top 10 in the GPs. So that the era was really strong. It's not like that anymore. Okay, the guys over here ride good over here. But the world level, it's a different ball game. And I think probably like Coops and Thorpe and Kurt Nickel, myself, Jamie Dobb, Paul Malin, a lot of riders like that, Mark Eastwood, when they go places, because that level was so high, even though maybe some of the guys were maybe 10th to 15th, that level was still really, really high.
Just to make it in wasn't it?
So it's quite a big sort of thing, and it's nice to see that people don't forget, and also for us as well. I see guys that used to marshal back in the early 90s, and I still see them at races now. So they've got the passion for motocross just as much as the riders have, because they enjoy the atmosphere, the people, the sport in general. So it's nice to see that same kind of people still around.
No, it's crazy. It is like a drug, like straight up like a drug. When you see the passion, and you know, when you step away from it a bit, it leaves a big hole in your life. And as you say, for riders, whether it's like, you know, mechanics or marshals or just people involved in it, you know, fans of the sport.
Yeah.
So it's cool to still see them. So we can talk forever, but we've got 30+2. So let's start off where it all started. So obviously you started racing in South Africa when you were a kid. So how did that all pan out? Like, so did you start on the 80s? Did you start 125s? Like, just talk us briefly about how your South African career went.
Well, my folks emigrated to South Africa from the UK in I think it was 76. Okay. So I was born in the UK, went to South Africa 76, 7 years old. There wasn't anything you could do as a 7-year-old. I was already riding bikes. I was riding bikes over here when I was 4, around the garden on an idle jet. So when I got there, I was already riding bikes. My dad got me like a little 50 and stuff, but I started racing in the 80 class on a Yamaha. I think it was a YZ80E. I think it was a 77 or 78 model, something like that. Right. And that's I started racing on a Yam 80.
Was that South African Nationals you started doing?
That was just basically because really in SA at the time there was only really one meeting in the whole country at one track over any one weekend. That was it. Okay. So there was, but most of it tended to be Transvaal, which is where I was from. Right. I went to Transvaal meeting. You know, I can't remember the Sparvata, I think it was. That was the name of the track, deep sand track. Yeah. Which is not my forte, but anyway. So that was my first meeting, and like all the top adults were there, and you know, so we were at the same race meeting with like what would be your British Championship riders over here. We were there watching the pros ride as well, you know. So it was quite nice that everyone was together at the same meeting.
So you did like, well, it must have been the same when I was there, because we had like a Transvaal Championship, and then you go to a national, then it would be like interprovincial. So you'd have like a Transvaal team, a Durban team, Cape Town team. Yeah. So it must have carried through quite far, that whole like, because it's definitely not like that now, you know, like still even to win like a Transvaal Championship when I was there, like in the start of the 90s, was still something decent, you know. And then kind of like once I'd left, I'd speak to Richard van der Westhuizen, and they'd literally maybe just use 1 or 2 as a warm-up for a national. So that whole, you know, like provincial championship thing kind of fell away. Yeah. I think like towards the end of the 90s, you know. Yeah.
I think when I was there, there was some sort of club meetings, then there was your South African Championship meetings, the big ones where everyone would be, every class from 80s to 500s would all be there on the same day. And then you would have like your provincial Transvaal Championships and, you know, TAL Championships, which again was the same thing, just provincial, but all the classes from 80s, because there were no 65s at the time, so from 80s through to 500s. Yeah.
And was it, so my time was always like the Durban guys were like the best guys. Was it the same for you guys? Like,
no, it wasn't Transvaal. Like Transvaal, which is where we were from, was where the faster guys tended to be. There were still good guys from the coast. Yeah. Not so much from Cape Town at the time, but there were still guys like Brett Redman. Okay. Who was son of the famous road racer Jim Redman. Brett was from Durban, from the TAL. There were a couple of guys, Gary Bergstrom. Also from the TAL. He used to come up. Who are the other guys? Anyway, quite a few guys from Durban were pretty good, but the majority of the faster guys were from and also, to be truthful, majority of the races, the nationals were in the were in the Transvaal. Oh, okay, cool. So you had like Tarleton, Syringa, Corribrick tracks, and then you only really had, when you went to the TAL, you had maybe like, you know, Hammersdale, or you had Peter Maritzburg track, and Cape Town you'd have Killarney. Yeah, you only go to Cape Town once. There's only one national there, but there was probably 5 or 6 in Transvaal.
Yeah. I think it was the same in my time. Like they'd have like, you know, like Durban would have Maritzburg and Springfield. They'd have like 1 or 2 tracks where, like Johannesburg, where I'm also from Joburg, and like from my house, probably in like a 30-mile radius, there'd probably be 7 or 8 tracks. Yeah. You know, like I think the Transvaal definitely had like a lot of tracks to kind of work with. So I'm just trying to figure out in my head. So like, obviously, like I know a lot of the older guys from the racing that stayed back. So what kind of riders would you have grown up with in your racing career in South Africa?
Well, when I first started in the 80s, the guys that I looked up to were people. There's a guy, Grant Maben, who ended up losing the use of one arm. I'm not sure how that happened, whether it was a motocross accident, but Grant was the top adult guy there. Everyone used to look up to Grant. And then people like Charlie Tisson, Tyrone Stevenson, Tony Riddell, who Tony actually came and raced in the UK for 1 year.
Yeah, he was on, so he was actually on the team, the 1 year I did Farley for South Africa, Tony Riddell was on the team. And he was saying some stories about he raced. He was the first South African dude to race World Championships or something like that.
Yeah, Tony was the first guy really to come over, and with a lot of help from my dad, actually.
Oh, really?
My dad arranged arranged a lot of Tony stuff, in the UK. Because I think my dad wanted to see, because the guys were good. They were good racers. I mean, some of the guys, they used to go to the States quite often and ride. And I know Grant Maven did, and Grant did really well, like in America. So there were some really, really good riders in South Africa, guys that don't get talked about now because they're kind of in that area sort of beyond me. When there's only from myself onwards and Colin Dugmore onwards, it gets spoken about quite a lot. The guys before that were really, really good. And it's really down to those guys that brought us along as riders, because we looked up to them and wanted to do what they were doing. It
was pretty awesome to think, going to your time, guys that progressed from South Africa, like, you had Colin Dugmore, yourself, Greg Albertine, Paul Cooper, Ryan Hunt, Dennis Hurtson, and then the era I raced in. So, like, what I want to kind of bring up is I was in Portugal once in 2005, and it was from South Africa, myself, Gareth Swanepoel, Tyler Rattray, and Wyatt Avis. And if we go back to 1999, 2000, like, we were all racing the South African Nationals on 80s around Hammersdale, and what was the track, like Gosforth Park and tracks like that. And then fast forward 5 years and you like racing world championships, so it must have been the same for you, like, with those guys I mentioned, like Ryan. Obviously Ryan did the British as well, Dennis Hurtson. So Dennis was kind of like, when I was in the 80s, he was like winning in South Africa, he was riding for Schick Yamaha. And I was like, this dude is awesome. And then you kind of didn't hear much of him, but then obviously I watched a lot of like 90s motocross and stuff, and I saw he was riding for Kawasaki and he'd get the odd podium in England and stuff. And then obviously Ryan was obviously really good, and Coops, so you think, like, if you think of South Africa, just like, it's a big country, but the racing's not big. Everyone rides standard bikes, like, there's like 8 nationals a year. Guys don't get paid to ride there, but they do produce some, like in that era, especially your era, they produce some really good talent.
I think the racing in South Africa, the riding in South Africa was very different to the riding over here, because over here it's pretty much racing. Now and again you go practicing, but there weren't that many practice tracks back in the 80s to go practice, or even like the 90s. But in South Africa, because the land is so different to over here, the land's very open. It's not fenced off or posted off or hedgerows like it is over here. It's quite open. We'd come home from school and I'd go and get on my bike and I'd put my gear on. I'll just ride down the road and I'd be off into the veld. And I had loads of tracks I could just go and ride. So I think it produced so many guys that were good with bike control. A lot of play riding. Just finding stuff to do. We never did motos and stuff, but so from sort of my era, which is also the tracks were influenced by the American riders that used to come over and ride sometimes tracks for the whole year.
In your time, dude, I look at some of the Sun City Supercross and like Corribeck Supercross, and what was the one in Durban?
Kings Park,
dude. It was like
nasty. Nasty, because there was no nice landing ramp. There was no nice landing ramp. You used to jump and flat land it and stuff. But but that was in the day. That was the height of technical tracks over there. But it wasn't much room to get it wrong. If you got it wrong, you were off.
I guess that's why they produced us technical riders and stuff. And going back to what you said about the play riding and stuff, I really think that like, I can tell you love riding, even the little bit of riding I did with you, like how you could like hop bumps and look for lines, get a good feel for a bike, and you like to play in a bike. And I'm the same, dude. Sometimes I'm embarrassed about how much I like to ride, even to this day. And I think it is from that time when we fell in love with riding, it was just like we had so much fun, like I do my work, and then my mom would say, right, you've got half an hour to play ride, and we go to the back of the tracks and there's jumps everywhere. We'd ride the tracks backwards, jump the jumps backwards, we jump from table to tabletop across the tracks. There's everywhere you could go. We get places to practice endos, practice wheelies. We go on out rides and stuff, So actually learning to ride a bike like was so much fun, dude. It was so much more than just doing laps around a motocross track.
Now I don't think I ever strung more than 4 fast laps together when I was young, because I was the same as you. I'll be doing 2 or 3 laps quick, then I'd go and find a section of the track and I'll just practice that section, whether it be like a triple into a turn, into a tight, and I'll just keep doing it and doing it and doing it until I got it sussed. Then I'd go somewhere else and I'd go play ride and find something like jump, which was really gnarly. Then I'd go do another couple of fast laps. My laps are always like balls out. I'll do 3 fast laps as fast as I could. Then I go have a rest and go back out play riding. And like, I grew up sort of I grew up not enjoying racing, but I grew up enjoying riding.
Yeah, you loved riding.
I love riding,
yeah,
and that's kind of, for me, the big difference when I came here is that all that play riding stopped.
Yeah.
Because apart from the odd place where you could play ride, there was an awesome place at Crick and a big quarry that me and Coops used to go to near Luton.
Yeah, Coops says about you. There's
Sundon
a cool
Park.
photo of him. I think you and him, he's doing a knack, and the jumps are like huge, dude.
But because we could find stuff, you just spend all day. There was no track there. You just find all day finding sections, and we could see
and you knew it anyway from riding South Africa. I guess you kind of knew how to like look at angles and stuff.
And it helps you read the ground. You know, what I was very good at as a rider was reading the terrain, reading the track, and using the whole track to help myself cover the ground better.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys over here would just come out of a turn, point the bike, and like that, hit every bump on the track. Where I'd be skipping from one
line.
So they hit 5 bumps and I only hit 2.
Yeah.
Most of the time, my wheels off the floor.
Yeah.
But just smooth. And so I read the track differently, and it was thanks to all my riding, all my play riding and SA that taught me to look and to use stuff.
Did you ever ride at Rhino Park?
Yes.
In the corridors there.
Sandflex.
Dude, that was insane.
Yeah, out the back of the track.
Yeah. Like I remember one year, Colin was doing his off season in South Africa. Colin Dugmore and Pitt Barrow was there.
Yep.
And Colin was jumping these jumps, and dude, Pitt was like, he was done. He's like, I'm not even going to give that a go, you know, like. But there was like cliffs, you know, like that you were literally going so high and just like landing on and going forward, you know. But it's normal for those guys because they grew up doing stuff like that. We spent a whole day just doing that, just looking for stuff. Yeah. You know, I mean, even me and Coops at Sundon Park, you know, we'd be looking. We could see a step up in the corner of this quarry, but to get there was across all these bumps, and we had to figure a way out of getting across these bumps so we could get to the bottom of the step up with enough speed to do it. And it took probably like 3 hours to figure out, you know, tire tap this and double that, and you know, but we got there in the end, and that's technical, and that's really teaching you stuff that you can't learn on the track doing motos. Yeah, exactly. Like you were saying, like when you come to the tracks in England, and I raced you for 20 years, and I remember in 03, 04, you walk in the track, and no lies, some of those tracks are still exactly the same layout, with the same bumps.
And back in South Africa, like we spoke about earlier off camera, they'd run the track one way, and the next time you went there, it would be backwards.
Yeah.
So it's a whole new track for everybody. Or they'd change the track and modify and change the jumps, or go a different, put a new section in. You know, so it was always a challenge. Yeah. Where over here the tracks were like there was the odd one where they used to change. The majority of tracks were the same day in, day out. Hawkston Park, stuff like that. Yeah. There's bumps there from the 60s. Yeah. It's still there.
I think it takes so long here with health and safety and stuff to make a track with the post and the safety, like to completely redo something. You know, like I remember a track near me called Kempton Park, and literally every 3 months they would change it. And my riding partner was Wayne Smith. Did you ever do any racing with Wayne?
Yeah, I raced with Wayne. Yep.
So he was my teammate, and I was 16 and he was 32. So we'd use each other to like do motos and stuff. But he used to jump anything, like when we go on night rides and stuff. And I remember going to this track at Kempton Park, and I got to the age where like he's not going to do anything I'm not doing. Yeah. And man, some of the jumps, even on like a 252 stroke Honda, they had this step up, and like we were saying earlier, they just dump sand and the landing's like vertical. Yeah. So like you never ever spot landing, but you're always going a little bit long, but you still send it every lap. Yeah. Just remember that track changing all the time, you know. Then you go to race and they change it, and you know, I guess it keeps the brain.
It's a challenge. Working, every time it's a challenge. So like as a rider, you kind of like, you know, you go back to the same track and it's the same every time you go there. It's kind of, you know, your lines, you know where you're going to go, you know where all the passing is going to be done. It's not that challenging anymore, where it's new for everyone. Yeah. You know, you go in there and you've got to rethink everything. You know, keeps you on your toes.
Definitely. One last thing I want to touch on about South Africa. So was there anyone from your era that was left behind? So like obviously yourself, Ryan, there's a lot of guys that chose that European route. Was any guys that stuck out, that stayed and did the whole South African thing, won a lot of South African championships, that didn't venture?
Not necessarily for the only guy that kind of, and it was really through bad luck, it was Gary Butcher. Yeah. But Gary was, when I was on 80s, coming when I first started coming into the sport, Gary was the number one kiddie out there on a small bike. I mean, Gary was a phenomenal rider. Gary went to the States. Yeah. I think the same time myself and Colin Dugmore came to Europe, Gary went to the US. And I think Gary was the first ever South African rider to qualify for an AMA Supercross.
Oh, wow.
And Gary was very talented, but Gary ended up breaking his back. He was
Right.
a test rider for HRC in the US for Honda America.
Oh, okay, right.
Ended up falling off, landing on his knees and breaking his back and paralysed.
Yeah.
Gary was the only one, I would say, out of our era who went somewhere else that was as good as us.
Yeah.
That could have done, you know.
Okay.
But just through bad luck, you know. Circumstances happened. But apart from that, there was only myself and Colin were kind of like quite a step above anybody else there. The next guys sort of were like Brett Redmond, but Brett was a bit older than us, and Brett kind of stayed.
Wayne Michael Smith was like your sort of age?
No, Michael was a little bit younger.
Okay.
Wayne Smith was older than us as well, you know, by a few years. Because I always tend to jump up classes early. I went straight from the 80s straight into the 125 juniors. I missed out the 100 class.
Okay.
I went straight to the adults, you know, early as well. So
I
was always riding against guys that were like 4 or 5 years older than me. But the guys sort of who stayed down, I kind of lost contact with because I was up in the adults and they were still in the juniors. So, you know,
right.
Yeah.
Oh, fair play. Cool. While we're on the South African thing, I just want to touch on, did you ever watch Jared Yarder ride a bike?
No, I didn't know.
Man, it was actually like unreal to watch. I think to this day, he's in the top 3 guys I've ever watched ride a motorbike.
Okay.
So like Ryan, just as an example, so he was 14 or 15 and he was on, my dad was parts manager Suzuki. We had like a little team and he was on that team riding Suzuki because he was going to Europe that year. And Ryan had come back, and Ryan, you know how good Ryan was.
Yep.
And he was on a KTM as well when the KTM 125s are good.
Yep.
And they went to Hammersdale, which was where Jared was from. And dude, he was putting like 4 or 5 seconds a lap into Ryan.
Yeah.
It was gone, you know, like it was next level. Like Grant, the year before Grant won the World Championship, Grant would come home and like Jared would like run with him all day long.
Yeah.
I think he did the 2 races I know he did a race for Jan de Groot when he was 15 on a Kawasaki. He finished 7th in Germany.
Yep.
And what was the other race he did? He did Ling for Rob Hooper.
Okay.
I think he was 14 or 15.
So what happened to him then?
So I don't know the full story. But him and Wyatt Avis ended up on a team.
Yeah.
And then Wyatt stayed and Jared went home. But like talent-wise, dude, like never seen anything like it.
I mean, there are a lot of good riders from SA that could have come to Europe or could have gone to the US, and with the right sort of management and the right bikes and the right people and stuff, could have gone on to do good things because they're very technical riders. Yeah. Because of the play riding thing, the tracks are very technical. They could have gone on to be top guys.
I think on that side, like you might agree with me and you might not. I think the toughest thing is it goes beyond even riding. It's like living, you know, like when you're comfortable in South Africa, you got your family, you got your chick, you got the tracks, you know, you the best guy there.
Yeah.
When you come here, you got to learn a lot, dude. Like, you know, when it's raining and the tracks are different and, you know, the results don't come straight away. You don't know anyone.
Yeah.
You know, especially those guys that moved to like Belgium and stuff. Like, just after my time was the time started when you could pay for rides and stuff. And so many South African families sold up everything. We're going to go live the Langston, Albertine dream. And, you know, they end up back in South Africa, you know, just because the way of living is so different.
It's so different. See, I was fortunate because I'm English and to start with. You know, because I'd moved there for 10 years. I went there at 7. And I came back when I was 17. So I'd only been there for 10 years. When I came back, you know, my grand and granddad was still in the UK.
Yeah. And
I came back to the same area where I was kind of born.
Okay, cool.
So I already sort of had this is why I came back to Europe. I was going to go to the US.
Yeah.
But it was easier to come back to Europe because I've got family here. We knew Great Britain. You know, my dad, you know, went back to pretty much the Northamptonshire area, which is where I was born and grew up.
Okay,
so
cool.
It was an easier step, which this genuine South African born guy wouldn't have had that. Because to them the whole of the UK is completely
different, like the lifestyle,
and it's complete lifestyle shock because the weather was worse then than what it is now. The winters were harsh over the snow. You come back here February, March, and you're racing Hawkeston Park in January, and it's like snowing, and it's like that's a serious shock.
Then that's something that goes beyond riding a motorbike.
Absolutely,
it's like how badly you want to be there and how bad you want to kind of make it.
Yeah.
Was it always your plan to kind of go to South Africa, do some racing out there, and then move back and try to be a professional motocross racer?
No, I mean, I went to South Africa as a 7-year-old, you know. So for me, it was just being dragged along there by your parents because they decided to emigrate. I got a bike and I rode, and you know, when I first rode, I wasn't very good, and I just kept on plugging away. I think down the line when I started to get better at about 12 years old, 11 years old, my dad started, because I was winning sort of, you know, nationals and stuff when I was about 11. My dad started to think down the line, you know, this could be a a stepping stone for a career. I tried road racing. My dad was from a road racing background, and he would have liked me to have gone into road racing. But you couldn't do road racing until you were like 16. Right. So it was easier to sort of look at the motocross side. So every year from when I was about 11 onwards, I would come to the UK and I'd do a couple of big sort of schoolboy meetings, just to see where I was at, sort of thing. I kept coming back. One year I missed out because I'd broken my foot at East London National in SA. I think I was 83. I missed out coming here, but every year I'd come back here just to see where I was at. And because he had the vision of, you know, coming back here when I was 16 or 17.
And obviously it would have been a lot easier to make a living out of doing it here. Well, like, was there a possibility in South Africa to make a career getting paid to race?
The year that, because I went adult in 85, just as I turned 16 in SA, and I had an offer. I was riding for Bradshaw Kawasaki that year, and then 85, that was 85. So 86, I had an offer from Caltex Honda in South Africa as a paid with a salary to stay in South Africa and ride. So I could have made a career out of racing, but I didn't. I decided to come to the UK and pursue.
And the possibilities, I guess, you know,
are much larger.
World Championship kind of level. So moving on to the UK, obviously you've moved over here. What is the biggest, like you've just kind of touched on it already, but the biggest adaptation you had to make to like lifestyle here?
I think the lifestyle really didn't change too much because my family wasn't wealthy. We came from quite a we never were short of anything, but I didn't come from a wealthy background. I had the same kind of stuff I had here as what I had in SA. The biggest sort of thing for me was the riding side, was finding, because I was out on my bike in SA almost every day of the week, because I could go out for half an hour just down the road and play ride, and then come back home and park the bike
after school. You could go ride after school.
The weather was always good. So suddenly come over here and find, up until about April time, that you were really, really struggling to find anywhere to ride. You know, everywhere was waterlogged or muddy, and you know, how many times do we ride in proper mud in SA?
I mean, it doesn't happen.
I can count the times over a 10-year period, probably on one hand. You know, so that was the biggest kind of thing, is finding places to ride. I did end up finding a few, but they weren't like SA. I did find the travelling quite harsh. So I did find, because obviously then at the time I was driving a lot into France, French internationals, doing a lot of stuff, you know, on the continent, and I did find that quite sort of hard work, because I never really had that in SA.
Whereas South Africa, it's like once a month you do a national, and that's pretty much the driving you do, isn't it?
And drive down to Cape Town from Joburg, like say 12 hours or something, and it's not so bad. But when you're doing a 3-day drive from, you know, like England to the south of France or to Italy or something, it's like
it's a bit different.
And you can't ride then, so I'm like twiddling my thumbs, sat in the van, you know. It's I found that quite difficult.
It is something I struggled with as well when I came over. I used to always get very anxious of the volume of riding that I was doing compared to what I did, you know, like first of all, financially, you pay to ride you all the time, and then second of all, the traveling, you know, like diesel there and back. And, you know, like where, as I said before, like I could go after school down the road, before, and then I started going before work and riding at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then going to work, training afterwards. And then when I got here, and I was like, you know, sometimes you can get 1 day a week in, and you know, the sessions, you're like, man, this isn't enough. You know, it used to make me quite anxious, but we're definitely lucky growing up on the tracks and stuff we had.
Oh, very, very. I mean, the crazy thing is like I was driving to school when I had my own van. I was driving to high school, standard 8, so it was like 14. I was driving to school in my own van, bought to me, supplied to me by Kawasaki South Africa, who knew I was 14 years old. I'd drive to school, park my van up, had my name all over the side. I was 14 years old, but over there, it was so kind of relaxed. They weren't really that bothered, you know, like people didn't care. So we had a lot of freedom.
My dad left South Africa, and I was left with my mom, and like we'd be driving back from Durban, and I was like 14, 15 as well, and I'm like, right, let me just dark. Let me just drive, you know, like you can never do that here. Imagine like 15 years old driving.
I got pulled over at 12 years old driving my dad's car with a trailer on. My dad was passenger, but I was driving Durban National on the way back from the Durban National. Got pulled over because we didn't have a tax disc on the trailer. And the copper stopped me and took my name and what have you, and asked me my date of birth, and he said, "But you're only 12 years old." I went, "Yeah." And that was it. My dad got booked, you know, and But,
it's normally $50, $100 just to sell those for a little bit. So who was your crew here? Like, so in your career here, who did you create friendships with? Like, who did you hang out with?
Well, I bought one of probably my best friend from South Africa, Sean Brown, came over with me when I first came over here in '86. And so my first sort of crew was that I came over with my dad, Sean. Sean was like my best buddy in South Africa.
Oh, cool.
Sean sadly passed away about 5 or 6 years ago. But Sean was with me for a couple of years, my first few years, and I would have liked Sean to have carried on with me, but circumstances didn't allow it. But I kind of found that I've always been a bit of a, I'm not saying alone. I've always been a little bit. I had to keep myself to myself, so I never really formed that many sort of relationships with other riders as such. And go, I rode a bit with Jamie Dobb. I rode a bit with Paul Malin to start with, because Paul came to South Africa as a schoolboy to come and do the international series in one of, I'm not sure what year it was, might have been 83 or 84.
Was that Corribrick?
It was at Corribrick, and they went to Hammersdale, and they went to, so he did the whole international series. It's about a 5 or 6 round series. Again, my dad instigated getting the guys over from England, from Team Green. So Paul came over. So when I came back over here, we already knew Paul and Brian May. So I used to go riding with Paul. Then we kind of met Jamie Dobb, and I used to go riding with Jamie. So those are the guys I probably rode with, although they were sort of like quite strong competition then in the championships. I kind of rode with them a little bit. And then eventually, when Coops came over, I forged quite a good friendship with Paul. So and we lived fairly close together. So myself and Paul used to go riding fairly regularly and training as well.
He's a cool guy to be around, Coops. He's got a good energy. Especially in those days when he was racing, I bet that must have been.
We had a lot of fun, because at the time, when Paul came over here, I was already sort of a British champion in the classes. So Paul was aiming at myself, and we used to have this joke. I used to say to Coops, he used to say to me, like, when you come up to lap me, just shout and I'll move over and let you by. Then he'd tag on behind. But, that didn't last long, because, he worked hard and he tried. But it was good, because I was dragging Paul along at the same time. Then he was kind of pushing me along. So he was really good for me, as the same as I was good for him. So it actually benefited us both.
I guess it's the same, like you, like very naturally talented and enjoy riding a bike, and you get like a Coops is obviously talented as well, but he was like a workhorse.
He's got a lot more of a work ethic than I've got.
So like when you kind of meet in the middle, like when you're riding, like both of you kind of helped out. And then how was it like? Obviously, you guys had a good friendship, and then like when you were actually racing for championships, like '96, it came down to 2 points at the end of the championship that year.
But '96,
was that weird, or just another guy to race with?
It was kind of weird in a way, because Coops was like my best mate over here. So but once the gate stops, everyone is the same. It's just another racer. I kind of felt, in a way, bad, because he led up until Ling. I led the championship early in the season, then coming to Ling at the last round, he had a couple of points lead. And I heard a lot of people say, Everts got in the way, and he did it on purpose, and he stopped Paul from finishing second in the one race, which would have given Paul the championship. And
was it the first motor? You were first, Stefan was second, like you literally went over the line together. Was that the first motor?
I think it was. I think it was the first one. And
then that tied it. That tied the points.
That tied it. So went into the last one tied, and then I beat Paul in the last one. But a lot of people sort of said, Stefan kind of got in the way, and without that, and if Stefan wasn't there, Paul would have won the championship. But just the way things go, whether Stefan did slow down, did sort of drop back, I will never know. Certainly, I was never aware of any sort of team orders from Colin Reid, and at the end of the day, but it did make me feel a little bit sort of a little bit gutted, because I want Paul to do well. He's my buddy. I want him to do well. The same as I want to do well. But
it's quite a cool thing in like like a legit athlete is when you're happy for your friends doing well. It's like
exactly. He was competition. He was also my mate. So like, although I was happy because I won, I would have almost been just as happy if he'd won. So you kind
of see, especially when you're friendly with someone, you can see the ups and the downs, where they've come from, how hard they work for something. When you see them progress to what they want to do, it is always a good feeling. When was the first time? So when you came over, when was the first time you're kind of starstruck on like, I'm racing against this guy? Or
probably the first time I've never really been that starstruck, because I always aimed really high. I was always looking at the top guys, thinking, right, I want to get there. And when I eventually got there, probably my first ever French international was at a track called Tilly Cecile in Bayeux, and I was one of my first weekends ever of being in the UK. I went there, and you had Dave Thorpe, George Jobet, André Malherbe, Eric Gabors, Hakan Karlquist. you had everybody. You had like, I think it was 5 or 6 world champions on the line.
Wow.
And I was on a 500 at 16 years old.
Yeah.
Was I 17? It was 86.
Okay.
So, and that was my first ever French international, and I had all these world champions there.
Okay, cool.
So, but again, I was there to race. I think I finished second and third.
No way,
so I beat a lot of the guys. And then landed on the fallen rider because the yellow flag wasn't out. I took off this jump and I landed on a guy that crashed, knocked myself out in the last race.
Yeah.
But that's as starstruck as I'd ever been because, you know, and probably actually the only other time
in South Africa. So like when you're racing in South Africa, was there magazines and stuff where you could see guys like Ricky Johnson? And
I was, although I was probably looking more at the American magazines. I was looking at Ricky Johnson, David Bailey.
Like your style is a lot more American than what is European. You know, like the way you rode a bike.
Just because also the American riders that were riding in South Africa at the time, Jim Tarantino, Larry Wassick, Brian Marscoff, Rex Dayton.
Okay.
And I was watching those guys. And I had training days with Rex Dayton when I was younger. So and I was watching those guys. So I was always more American than European.
Yeah.
My style did suit the American tracks more, you know, but I also was following the Grand Prix as well. Dave Strybos, I was following in the 125s because I wanted to do 125 GPs in '86. Yeah. So I knew of Pekka Vecken and Dave Strybos. But the big guys, the big class was the 500. So when you had, you know, Malherbe, Thorpe, De Boers, you know, Colquist, Jobé, all on the start line, and I was parked my little old standard 500 next to Thorpe's in an RC. You know. It's like, wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So yeah, that was probably the first time I was really starstruck in a way.
To get those results in your kind of first go must have been. You must have known at that time, right? This is something that's going to work, you know. Yeah,
definitely. I think it was but I just raced.
Yeah.
You know, when I was on the track, once the gate dropped, it didn't matter who was there. I kind of didn't see them as Dave Thorpe, as like you know, Andrew Malherbe. It was just another rider in front. It doesn't matter who it was. Then when you look at the results at the end of the day and you see your name in print, you know, Dave Thorpe, Rob Herring, you know, and you think, actually, you start
going through it. Yeah. It's not until you look back as well, you know, like I think in the time you always want to do better and it's never good enough. And then you get 20 years in and you look at some result sheets and you're like, oh, that was actually pretty gnarly, you know, like at the time, this is something I wish I could go back and do and just enjoy the process more, you know, because
when you rode the motocross nations and stuff, you know, remember you're in Erne. And you look at your moto sheet and you look at the guys you're riding against and you think, actually, that's quite a feat, even just being there. It's like the top guys, you know.
Pissed to go, like, I think I finished 15th at that one in the one race and I was like pissed about it. And then like Ricky Carmichael and Kevin Wyndham didn't lap me and you're like, dude, now, like, you know, like if Jack Lawrence didn't lap a dude from South Africa, you'd be like, he's doing pretty good, you know. But at the time, you like always wanted a bit more. Talking about these nations, so, you know, obviously you were born here in South Africa and came back. So was it always like you were always going to ride for England? Did it ever feel weird, like, oh, maybe I should ride for South Africa? Was it always like, no, I
was never asked, but apparently the donation has always been by passport. So I never had a South African passport, so I was always English.
Right.
So I could never have ridden for South Africa. I would have loved to have done because, to be truthful, I kind of owe most of what I'd done in my racing career to my time on the bike in SA. Far more so than my time riding over here. But I'm British, you know, by passport. So
like over there.
You know, but the first year I came here in '86, you know, I rode for Team GB in '86, and we finished second to the greatest American team of all time.
Yeah.
So that was a real sort of like feat in my first year. You know, as nobody knew me when I first came over here, so to do that was like pretty awesome. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a bit of a joke. I think the vet donations would be quite nice to do a South African thing, you know.
But you think about the time, you know, like if you could have had yourself, Greg Albertine, and say Coops, you know, like that's a gnarly team. You know,
I thought about it. I thought about it before, but because it's always been, you know, because you see like some guys who ride for like Andorra. And they're American, US, but they ride for like a very
Costa Rica,
Costa Rica or something. You think, hang on a minute, that's not quite right. But if we suddenly thought, actually, we could ride. You know, it didn't have to be via passport. And also, some people have 2 passports. They could technically ride from the country. It would have been quite cool. And South Africa would have had a really, really strong team.
And there was a lot of guys, you know, like Ryan, Colin, yourself,
Greggy,
Dennis, you know, like loads of dudes.
Albie, you know, like is I mean, SA could have been cool. At a certain point. If you look at the best riders South Africa have produced, if you could have got at they may have been in different eras.
Yeah.
If you could have got them in the team at the same time when they were at their sort of peaks,
yeah,
you know, potentially SA could have won vmxdn.
I honestly think, obviously, my era, so like what I know is one era past your era.
Yeah.
And I honestly think if Grant Langston, Gareth Swanepoel, and Tyler Rattray all got on a team when everything was golden, that team could win.
Definitely.
Win the Destination.
Definitely.
But it never ever happened. It was always like Gareth would get hurt, or Grant didn't want to ride for South Africa because he just had a season, or you know, and then like you'd have one weak guy on the team, so then the best guy on the team's kind of just doing it for himself because he's there to win that. He's not doing it for the team, so if they crash, they just pull out, you know, like. But I think if everything lined up and you had those three guys on a team, that would have been
pretty awesome. That's kind of one thing that a lot of teams always have. They never have three really solid strong ones. They have one or two, and there's always like a weak link in the team. And that always, and it's unless circumstances really fall into their sort of, you know, hands in a positive way, they're going to end up being like fourth place back. But if they could have three strong riders, you know, and at times you had the riders, it was just getting them together at the right time, you know. And
always politics of MSA and stuff like that. There's always heaps kind of going on behind the scenes. And then just to end, dude, I'm just going to do like a quick fire, just to end it off. So if you could relive one day of your motocross career.
One day of my motocross career, probably relive 1988 Motocross the Nations in France in Tilly's at I can't remember the track name now. Anyway, in France, 1988. Yeah.
Is that your first go? Was that better than the one you guys won in '94?
That was that was for me. I think just the way I rode, '88 was a good year for me, and I beat Ricky Johnson. I won the second 250 moto. That day, just the crowd was epic. The track was good. The atmosphere was good. You know, and for me, '88 was a really nice year for me. I was in good form. You know, so that sort of like that's a good one.
Day. Cool. Your favorite bike from your racing career?
My favorite bike, you know, I have so many favorite bikes because it depends how I look at things. If I look at back to SA, one of my favorite bikes is probably my '83 KX125. But then when I come over here, and I think one of my favorite bikes was my '88 Yam. I also enjoyed my '86 250 Cowie, you know, and then probably some of the hybrid Honda 500s. I
was going to ask you about RWJ,
how you know, probably the 98, the first one that I rode. I think I preferred that more than the 99, but that was a good bike. Colin produced it. That was great fun to ride. That was cool.
To have like the handling of that and the power. So something that, you know, I realized like once you kind of stopped riding, and when I knew you, you always had cool kit, you know, like it looked like you took pride in how you looked. And even when you're racing, like that, a Pico kit always looked sick. You always had cool helmets. You know, you like remind me of the kind of guy that took pride in your kit. Looking back, what would you say was your favorite gear setup that you raced with?
My favorite gear that I ever rode in was the Pico gear. And
was that the Crashel Honda year when you had the green?
Well, I ran a Pico from 86, 87, 88, 89. And then I had to use the team's gear, which was Tackler in 1990. I had no option. I had no option, but which was not nice. I have to say, which was like. And then eventually I did go back to a Pico later on. But if I could have stayed with a Pico the whole way through, because the gear was awesome. You know, but probably of all the gears, I like my 1988 a Pico gear, which was white, blue, and pink. And white Alpine style boots, and my custom painted arrows, which I designed. And then probably like my 92 Castrol Honda, a Pico gear.
That was nice setup, that wasn't it?
Yeah, so I've got a cat in here wanting to get out. But always the Pico, always the Pico gear. Yeah. It was just the quality was good, the colours didn't fade, and I got on really well with Vesti. Used to run a Pico.
So that's the same people as a Pico now?
The company got sold, I don't know how many years ago now. Vesti sold the company. I think Dylan Brown now runs a Pico.
Yeah, so Vesti, I met Vesti. So their Pico kit was actually Vesti's.
It was Vesti's company. He designed it. It was his company, and I rode for Vesti in '86. And you know, a lot of time for Vesti. He helped me massively. And yeah, I mean, even now, I've got just a Pico logo. It's such a shame the gear isn't made still now. Although a lot of guys are getting it copied, aren't they? For the vet donations.
I'll tell you which a Pico kit setup looked really cool was when Jeff Leach rode for Australia that one year. That was so tricky.
It was nice gear. It was nice gear. And the great thing with Vesti is if we if we came up with an idea and thought, oh, can we run different colours? Vesty was quite, you know, he would change some colours for us. So he was really good. The gear was sound.
Oh, sweet. Hard pack or sand?
Hard pack.
Yeah.
Sand.
Boy.
I mean, I rode really well in sand. I mean, some tracks, but my technique, I was fast in sand, but I didn't have the right technique or bike setup. But yeah, I'm a hard pack. Yeah, no, hard pack, man. Always.
I'm with you on that one. And then last one, who do you think is going to win the 450 American Supercross Championship?
Wow, it's actually quite a tricky one because I think Jet will win it. I mean, he's not having his own way for sure. You know, Cooper Webb's, you know, like he's there the whole time, and now with Tomac coming on strong. Yeah. But I think Jet will end up winning it, but it's going to be close. It's been a mega.
That dog in him, dude.
He hasn't had it his own way, has he? You know, like.
Just like weird how they can have an off weekend, you know, like those guys are so good, and then it'll be like Jet's the only one unless he crashes. He's not like, he can always come from like a 10th to like a 3rd, where sometimes you see some of those guys like Tomac or Webb run like a 7th or an 8th on a night, or in Sexton, you know, like Sexton, you kind of think the dude will be top 3 every weekend, and he can have like 7th to 8th.
Sexton reminds me a lot of Jet.
Same, they ride.
But there's little things that Jet does that. You know, just little things, little technical things that Jet does that maybe it'll show a bit more in the outdoors that no one else is doing. But Sexton's a lovely rider.
Like Sexton, you know, Jet and Sexton's very similar, where they're so good technically, but they still make a lot of mistakes. You know, like Sexton last year could have easily won that championship, but a lot of mistakes, but weird stuff. You know, like how good they are, and then the mistakes that they make, you're like. No ways.
On the part of the track where it's not even that technical.
It's not even technical. They must just like they're thinking too far ahead of where they're at or something.
Yeah, and they'll fall on something really simple. Tight turn, front end just goes kind of thing, or they just clip like a tuck block or whatever. The really gnarly technical stuff on the track, they just reel off lap after lap.
Unreal. Like you watch them, dude, and I think like just the levels elevated. You know, like when you watch them in those ruts and stuff, and you see like a cam from the top, and you just like, no way.
Whole rhythm section, they're landing in ruts, and they're swapping from one rut to. It's never in a straight line. They're going across and then back, and you know,
and it's tripling and quadding stuff. You just think, man, that's like. You know,
Supercross is awesome. I watch it religiously.
That's
every time it's on, I watch it live. You know,
I don't really watch much.
Watch the outdoor. I don't really watch the GPs. I watch the highlights in the morning. That's enough for me, to be truthful.
It's scary because those guys are so good as well. Like I don't know what the difference is. Like those guys are so good. The top 20 guys in the world are unreal. But it's like I'm the same. I watch all the outdoors, watch all the AMA Supercross, and then I literally just watch the news highlights on the.
But I watch the American stuff from start to finish.
Yeah.
You know, the whole way, so I don't want to miss a lap or anything.
Must be I don't know what it is, camera work or just the energy. Like
also, like with the Supercross as well, you look at it and you look at it's so much more than just the race, you know, and they do so much more for the public. Look what they do for the kiddies charity and what have you. You know, they put a lot back into not necessarily just the industry, a lot back into life. You know, where over here it's just the racing and that's it.
Racing.
It's so much
and
more
focused.
Do
so much like more kind of like where you're in different countries and different cultures, and it's something they could explore. But it's just getting across. You know, like even when you go to destinations and stuff now, like those European guys, like it's something else. You know, like you sit back and watch it. And I went to, which was the last time? I went with work to the one in America.
Yeah. You're going to go to Matterley this year?
Yeah, I'll be working with Almond Vision. So
I'm hoping to go there this year. Go watch. Cool. I'm hoping. Fingers crossed.
It'll be a good one because like those the ones where you can kind of like stand on and see the whole track. Are a good one. Same as Foxhills. That's why Foxhills is so good.
Yep.
Because people literally just get a spot. They're there for the weekend and they pretty much watch the whole race.
Yeah, this is great. It'll
be cool if I end up doing it and you doing it. Like I remember when I did the starting lap, I was stoked to see in the last one. So yeah. We'll have to try to do some riding if.
Definitely, we'll get out beforehand. And, spin some laps.
Stuff.
You know, that'd be
good.
Yeah. We have to drag him out.
Yeah, no,
Coops, if you're watching, you're going to get back on the bike.
He's told you, Coops. He's told you. Cool, Robbie. Well, thanks for your time, dude.
Pleasure, Neville.
Good to catch up.